This video is sponsored by Audible. Don't worry, I'm not going to spoil this game because it's great. Truly terrific and well worth your time. I'm only going to use footage from the first few hours of the game in this review, and I'm only going to talk about big concepts and characters that you meet in the game's trailer. If you want to go in completely blind, play the game and then watch this video, or leave the video on in the background and mute it. That helps the channel. Also, watch it on Nebula and buy my merch. Patreon. Okay, full stop. Marvel's Guardians of the Galaxy is my favorite Marvel video game ever made. Yes, so is Spider-Man PS4. I acknowledge that for most people, Spider-Man is number one. Thing is, I have no great affinity for Spider-Man. Don't get me wrong, I enjoy the character, but he's not my favorite. I tend to prefer ensembles. The X-Men, Doom Patrol, Avengers, Justice League, Fantastic Four, Teen Titans, Squadron Supreme, Sinister Six, Legion of Superheroes, New Mutants, X-Factor, X-Force, X-Statix. Basically, if your name starts with X, sign me the flark up. I love the rotating casts, the different powers, and the relationships between the heroes. They fight, they flark, they fall in love, somebody dies and everyone's sad, someone turns evil and that's a whole thing. Characters have kids who join the team, relatives show up, it's a mess, and I love it. And the Guardians of the Galaxy do all that particularly well, because unlike most of the teams previously mentioned, the Guardians are kinda terrible. Unlike, say, the X-Men, victims of prejudice, or the Avengers, heavy hitter supergroup, the Guardians of the Galaxy are brought together because they are all either criminals or assassins, which I guess is also kind of a crime, but like more, or weirdos, or they're just completely alone. So they're prone to make bad decisions. Bad decisions got them to this point in their life. So if you put them in a room with a bunch of other bad decision makers, things get worse. And then better, because they are the only people who understand each other. So when I heard that Eidos Montreal, creator of the Deus Ex games, is going to be working on a Mass Effect style Guardians of the Galaxy game, I was intrigued. Couldn't quite tell what to expect, but my interest was piqued. And I never would have guessed that it would not only deliver a story on the level with some of the best Guardians comic runs and films, but the linchpin of the entire story would be a group of villains who barely ever worked in the comics. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Guardians of the Galaxy 2021 is about the titular team made up of Peter Quill, Gamora, Drax the Destroyer, Rocket Raccoon, and Groot. They uncover a menacing new organization that threatens to destroy the entire universe. The game features cameos from a ton of Guardians and Marvel characters, who I will not spoil. You play as Peter and have the ability to command the other members of the team like Pokemon. It is a solely single-player game with a linear story, thank God. You can beat it in something like 10 hours. The combat is not that complicated, and you don't need to be particularly precise. Also, large chunks of the game, if not the majority, are spent exploring environments, which I quite enjoyed. There are also a few mechanics that I won't spoil, which are a ton of fun and unique to this game. The voice acting and writing is some of the best I've seen in a game, and the facial animations really help to sell each character's personality. I found Gamora and Peter's faces especially expressive and lifelike. The characters are a blend of the movie and comic Guardians. I would say the characterizations and backstories skew closer to the comics, with a lot of aesthetic choices coming from the movies. It's a seamless mix, and I really appreciate the design choices. And last thing, it's really funny. I cannot stress this enough. The game's a riot. It has the same vibe as the Guardians movies. Now, there are a lot of gut punches. I cried during the game. It's, as Vision would say, terribly well balanced. An expertly written game. And there's one specific change that the game makes, a way it deviates from all previous Guardians media, that I believe is what took the game from an 8 to an 11. But to understand that, I need to take you back, all the way back to 2007, and an event called Annihilation. The Annihilation event had just wrapped up, and a couple of characters were back in the zeitgeist. Gamora, Drax the Destroyer, Adam Warlock, Quasar, and most importantly, Peter Quill. As part of a follow-up called Annihilation Conquest, writer Keith Giffen wrote a comic called Annihilation Conquest Star-Lord, in which Peter Quill formed a team consisting of Bug, Deathcry, Mantis, Captain Universe, Rocket Raccoon, and Groot. At the end of Annihilation Conquest, Peter decided that the universe needed a proactive force to deal with the bazillions of events that almost keep destroying the universe. The team was made up of Star-Lord, Gamora, Drax, Rocket Raccoon, Groot, Adam Warlock, Quasar, Mantis, Cosmo, and eventually Major Victory, Jack Flag, Bug, and Moondragon. They were named after an older cosmic team, the Guardians of the Galaxy. The series was written by Dan Abnett and Andy Lanning and lasted 25 issues. It established the modern team and acted as a blueprint for all subsequent Marvel comics, as writers like Brian Michael Bendis, Donny Cates, and most recently Al Ewing would go on to write Guardian stories with a team led by Star-Lord and featuring some of the same characters. But that first team, Abnett and Lanning's Guardians, also known as Guardians Volume 2 or Guardians 2008, is what I want to focus on because several elements of that story make their way into this game. The biggest one being that the Guardians of the Galaxy are dealing with a bunch of problems. There is some sort of time traveler in their midst, secret invasions happening at the same time, and something called the Fault is opening and monsters are coming out. But the biggest thorn in the Guardians' side is an organization that had existed since the 70s but never really done anything significant. They were called the Universal Church of Truth. The Universal Church of Truth was created by Jim Starlin and premiered in 1974's Strange Tales issue 178. In Guardians 2008, the Universal Church is a space cult that worships Adam Warlock. They are powered by belief energy, which gives them various superpowers. Now I bet you're wondering, what is belief energy? And the answer is something. If Cardinals' beliefs are strong, they're able to access belief energy. However, if their belief wavers, they lose their power. So, kind of like a Green Lantern ring. But I'm sure you're also wondering, belief in what? What does the church believe in? And the answer is something. Sometimes the church believes in Magus, their evil purple space god. Sometimes they believe in a mission, like their quest to defeat death in Donny Cates' run. But mostly, they just believe in the church. It reminds me of a character named Gladiator. He's a member of the Shi'ar Royal Guard who is generally described as one of the strongest characters in the Marvel Universe. We haven't seen him in the MCU yet since he tends to appear mostly in X-Men comic stuff, or at least that's where he was introduced. Gladiator is a big player in a lot of Marvel events, since if the universe is destroyed, the Shi'ar are also destroyed, so he's got to get involved. But the interesting thing about the Gladiator, besides his wonderful mohawk and his appearance in the Juggernaut episode of the X-Men cartoon from Internet, is the source of his power. Gladiator is powered by confidence. The more confident he is, the stronger he becomes. And the more he doubts himself, the weaker he becomes. So his abilities are powered by belief. And when that belief is shaken by something like an unexpected defeat, his powers wane. That's pretty much how the church operates. They believe in the church and whatever it is they're currently trying to do. But that brings up a very important question. What does the church actually believe? Why would anyone join this cult? Their numbers grow by either convincing people that the church is the coolest or they just give up and are mind controlled. So in that case, those characters actually don't believe in the church's mission. They're just under super strong mind control, which is kind of where the church as an idea falls apart for me. The premise of Evil Space Church is very cool, especially if their spaceship is a floating cathedral named Sacrosanct. But for that church to be an interesting part of his story, it would certainly help if I had a sense for what the church believed. Besides Magus, what do they value? Because they aren't hucksters. This isn't a scam to steal faith energy and use it to power a, super weapon. The entire organization is run by zealots who believe in the church's mission enough to die for it. So what is it? The best explanation I could find comes from the church's first appearance, in which they're described as being a religion founded on honorable values that only apply to people within the church. Love thy neighbor in the church. Do whatever you want to other neighbors. In fact, kill them. If they won't convert, they need to be destroyed. So it's kind of a jab at organized religion and the hypocrisy that exists between how members treat each other and how they treat outsiders. But that isn't really interesting enough for me to be invested in the struggle to defeat them. I need a church who can pose a real threat because of a specific belief. A belief that can challenge our heroes in a specific way. Now, the church itself is usually built around a simple hierarchy. You've got Magus at the top, he's their Jesus, and then someone called the Matriarch under Magus, that's your Pope. And sometimes this is a Patriarch, but for the most part, Matriarch. And then under the Matriarch, you've got the main antagonist of this game, a character named Cardinal Raker. Let's talk about Raker. In the comics, Raker is a guy, He shows up every so often, fights with the Guardians, and then dies. There isn't much to him. He's just a named enforcer for the Matriarch. But in this game, he's a lot more. I won't spoil all of his backstory, but Raker, or Grand Unifier Raker, who we gotta raise, acts as more of a traditional cardinal. He is the church, and gives you most of the backstory of the church. He also has metal arms, which is pretty rad. And while Grand Unifier Raker is certainly the same kind of agent of the Matriarch as his comic counterpart, this Raker also has a very different energy. He clearly believes the Guardians are a thorn in his side and would love to vaporize him for killing all his dudes, but Raker also gives them an honest shot to join the church. He is an evangelist in the purest sense. Raker has good news that he wants to share. And that is what I believe is so clever about this version of Raker. He presents the most important element of an interesting narrative: choice. But not like Mass Effect, although, well, it does have that kind of choice too. Like games like Mass Effect and the Telltale games popularized the mechanic of choices and consequences in action games. You'd choose who to send on a dangerous mission, and that choice would lead to a consequence later down the line. A character who you lied to doesn't trust you. A character who you were nice to might save you. And sometimes the consequences are unintended, but the model of the game involves making choices that have consequences. And Guardians indeed has those choices. You can agree with Gamora or Rocket, and that will affect how they feel about you later on. I ended up agreeing with Gamora something like 90% of the time, but only because all of Rocket's suggestions were terrible. And if you save certain characters, they may show up to help you later, but that's not the choice I'm talking about. No, the choice comes in the form of something unique to this story called the Promise. But in traditional storytelling, this is something known as the lie. Lies are what narrative storytelling is all about. Setting up characters' beliefs, giving characters choices, and seeing how they react. It's the heart of every good story. And central to those choices are four things: the want, the need, the truth, and the lie. They're pretty self-explanatory, but basically, the want is the thing the character thinks they need, something they believe would fix their problems. And that want is perpetuated by a lie, the wrong thing about the world that the character believes. But once the character grows and accepts the truth, they're able to move past the want to what they really need. Here's an example from the world of film. In Disney's Hercules, our hero wants to live with the gods on Mount Olympus. To do that, he must become a hero. And Hercules believes a lie, that accomplishing traditional heroic deeds, fighting monsters and stuff like that, is what makes you a hero. But throughout this story, Hercules meets Meg, and he learns that being a hero is, quote, not about the size of his strength, but by the strength of his heart. So then Hercules realizes he needs to stay on Earth with Meg, the woman he loves. Every character in Guardians of the Galaxy wants to get back what they lost. Peter wants his family. Drax wants his family, etc. Every character needs to accept the truth that the past is the past and they can only move forward together. And that leaves the lie, which in this story, like I said, is called the Promise. That everyone can use the faith energy to bring their dead loved ones back to life. They don't need to move forward. And that, in a Guardian story, is an incredibly effective lie. Every character is defined by their trauma, and they're all pretty aware that they need to come to terms with their past. And doing that work is difficult, but in comes Raker with the lie. Moreover, the church presents not only a tempting prospect to the Guardians, but also the galaxy. And with a lie like this, you can see how the church is able to take over the galaxy so quickly. The game seems to play out in real time, which means, around a day. The galaxy goes from having barely any church presence whatsoever to enough that the Nova Corps, the Galactic Police, just quit because there's nothing they can do. The World Mind explains that within days, the entire universe will be overtaken by the church. If they were your typical conquering space army, it would be tough to believe. I guess something like the Phalanx could do it, but even they would meet the usual resistance. The superheroes would band together and make some sort of last stand. But there is nothing here to stand against. A lie this powerful spreads quicker than any army ever could. People willingly surrender. And in the game, it's scary. It's isolating. Every ally could be turned. Even team members might become corrupted. You can't depend on anyone but yourself, because it's a really, really, really dangerous lie. And that's something that the Universal Church of Truth never had before. They never had a weapon. Nothing to explain why they were a big deal. And because of that, they never really were. The Church was a bit player that showed up from time to make things difficult. But the Guardians of the Galaxy game fixed that. Not only was the Church given a dangerous new weapon in the Promise, but that promise was personified by one figure, Grand Unifier Raker. That's right, this video is kind of about him. Remember him? It's been a little while since he was mentioned. Raker wins the Most Improved Character Award. He takes the traditionally unclear mission of the Universal Church of Truth and elevates it to a simple one. And that is why I love this game. The villain presents a challenge you can't punch your way out of. I mean, you do punch and shoot and stuff, but all the big moments of the game are talking. Characters having conversations. And it rules, it's really good, everybody should play this game. Like I said at the top, this video is sponsored by Audible. Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to give you some recommendations. These are 3 books that I am currently reading on Audible. These aren't about screenwriting or superheroes. This is just what I enjoy reading if you want some recommendations. First one is a book called The Premonition. It is by Michael Lewis, the writer of The Big Short and Moneyball. I read everything Michael Lewis puts out. He's my favorite nonfiction author. The Premonition is about a certain global event that happened over the last 2 years that specifically, the book is about the untold stories of public health experts. It's really interesting. Cannot recommend enough. Michael Lewis also has some Audible originals. Those come free with your Audible subscription, so an added bonus. Next one I'm reading is a book called The Harlem Shuffle by Colson Whitehead. Just started this one, but it's a really fun novel set in Harlem in the 1960s about a furniture store owner who gets involved with crime and heist. It's very interesting so far, and I've heard nothing but good things. Third one, I'm rereading this one. It's called Last Call by Daniel Okrent, and it's a history of prohibition in America, which is a really fascinating story because it's this weird thing that happened to our country. We got really excited about it. It broke immediately, and then we had to go back and fix it. And the book highlights a bunch of the weird little mistakes and strange things that sprung out of prohibition. So it's a very good read. And you can find all 3 of those audiobooks along with many more on Audible. If you're not familiar, it's the leading provider of spoken word entertainment. Besides audiobooks for new releases, bestsellers, you've also got podcasts on there now, mostly Nitpicking, the podcast that I make weekly. That is on Audible, so you can listen to it there. You get 1 credit each month, good for any title in their premium selection, and they're yours to keep forever, and you get full access to their Plus catalog. And this holiday season, they have a terrific offer. Think about giving yourself the gift of an Audible membership. It's the absolute best time to do so with a special offer of 60% off your first 3 months. That's only $5.95 a month. Give yourself the gift of listening. For more, go to audible.com/NandoVMovies, NANDOVMOVIES, or text NandoVMovies to 500-500. That is audible.com/NandoVMovies, or you can text NandoVMovies to 500-500. As always, I have to give a huge thank you to everyone who continues to support the channel on Patreon, who listens to the podcast, mostly Nitpicking, and who follows me on Twitter, Instagram, Twitch, TikTok. Thank you guys all so much, and stay safe. I will see you next time.